Why do you care about this issue because you're not gay? Well, wait a minute. Why don't you care about this issue? Justify that for me. Give me a good reason why LGBT people don't matter to you, why black people don't matter to you, why first-generation immigrants don't matter to you. And people aren't able to come up with an answer because there's no answer. There's no reason why we're not tied all up in this together. My name is Sam White. My pronouns are he, him, and his, and identify as straight or heterosexual, depending on what kind of conversation we're having. My name is Sam, and this is my video out.
Bam!
I'm a civic entrepreneur and I'm an advocate. I work with brands and civil rights organizations on social impact campaigns to try and make a difference in the way that our culture and our society presses forward. And then perhaps my favorite thing in the whole world is I am lucky enough to get to travel to high schools and colleges and talk to students and talk with them and work through all of the things that frankly we don't talk about enough. And that's all the way from big things like how do we save the republic, all the way down to how do you navigate an undergraduate environment and there's all this other stuff going on and you're trying to figure yourself out, whether it's academically or professionally or sexually or party-wise, like how do you navigate all that stuff? And I think that young people, I think high school students and college students are sick and tired of being told you're the future. They're the now and we should treat them as such, and that's my favorite thing in the whole world. Part of the language around allyship can get really messy, right? Because I would never sort of call myself an ally. I think that's not a title that you sort of self-declare, right? That would seem a bit pretentious, more than a bit pretentious. And yet there has to be a language that we use to talk about people who care about things that don't affect them, right? And in the huge long term, absolutely all these issues affect all of us, right? And for example, with issues of race and racism, like the biggest elephant in the room is that like poor white people suffer from the white supremacy that they inflict on others just as much as anyone else. And so there's this tension there. However, I think that what I try and do is cast aside as much of the boxes that we try and put ourselves in. My freedom needs to be tied up in yours, and if it's not, then I'm making a statement that mine matters more than yours. And that's not something I've ever been comfortable with. It wasn't something I was comfortable with when I was 8, and it's not something I'm comfortable with now. There was an example with the first gay couple that I can recall meeting. My mom grew up in Philly, my grandma lived there until she passed, and my grandmother has been going to the orchestra concerts in Philadelphia for years and years and years. And so they're friends with all the people who they sit next to. And I remember when we arrived one day for dinner, there were these two older men who were having like a pre-dinner tea coffee with my grandma. And then when we left, right, they were introduced as the orchestra friends, cool. When we left, I asked my mom, I was like, where were their wives, right? Did their wives die? They seemed old, right? And I'm like, I don't know, 7. And my mom says, oh no, they don't have any wives. And I said, why? She said, oh, well, they're together. They love each other very much. And I said, okay, so are they like husbands? And she said, no, well, they're not allowed to get married. And I said, well, that doesn't seem right. And she goes, no, it doesn't. And that's not to say that we didn't have some sort of academic conversation for the next 2 hours about the structures of homophobia, but that you can explain this to kids in very simple terms. And this argument of, oh, well, how am I going to explain this to my kids? There's all kinds of other stuff that you're going to have to explain to your kids. And so if you can't explain this, that two people love each other very much, well, then you're not going to be a very good parent. Whew. The most pressing issue facing humanity today. Very low scale, no big deal question, no problem. The biggest dilemma that we as humans face is that we're really uncomfortable with looking at the people that we love and realizing and admitting and acting on the fact that they may not be who we thought they were, and reckoning with what that means for how we love them and what we can do moving forward. I don't think people are scared of self-reflection. I think people engage in self-reflection a lot more than they're willing to admit. We know what our own demons are. We know all the ways in which we contribute to this problem or that problem, or we used to talk back to our mom too much, or we look the other way when something's going on. That's not the hard part. The hard part is looking at someone who you identify as integral to how you figured out who you are. Looking at someone like your mom or your dad or a coach or someone who you had put up on this pedestal that they deserve. They invested time and love into you. They helped you figure out life. And then you have to look at that person and say, wow, you're not as perfect as I thought you were. And what does that say about me? Did the imperfect parts of you, did you give that to me? And that whole conversation is something that we're all terrified of. There are two things that give me the most hope. The first is that I keep finding ways to get up in the morning and feel good about my life and the prospects of the work that we do. And I don't think that I'm particularly exceptional. I don't think I'm stronger than anybody else. I think if anything, I've just been surrounded by enough people who told me that it was possible that I started to believe them. And so I really, really, really think that if I can do it, then anybody can do it. And I think there's real hope in that, not the kind of hope that's, wish upon a star hope, but like a hope that comes with effort and energy. And I think the second thing that gives me the most hope is that the age at which people are deciding that they are simply unsatisfied with the way that things are is dropping. That's not to say that I wasn't capable of it, or that my grandparents weren't capable of it, but for a whole number of reasons it didn't really happen. And we've seen across the political spectrum, across the cultural spectrum, young people who are still in many cases laughed away as unserious and not real. They're saying, fuck that. I'm gonna live in my shoes and who I am, and I'm going to speak out bravely. And the chips may fall where they may from there, but I will not have stood on the sidelines. And that is not just hopeful, that is powerful, that is inspirational, not in a, I wish I could be like that person, but I can be that person. And that's brilliant. For all the shit in the world, people are young and they care. And that, I don't know what else you could ask for. I think that we should all ask ourselves, like once a week, what's my favorite part of being me? I think that's like self-therapy right there. My favorite part of being me. My favorite part about being me is it's the thing I'm best at. All the other skills or whatever I can do aside, at the end of the day, I can be me better than anyone else can be me. Change is unbelievably slow, and I think part of the difficulty is that when it's so slow, it can be difficult to feel like you're making any at all. And that's what can feel tough, because you feel like you're spinning your wheels, when in fact, you're not, right? It takes an incredible amount of time. And I think the frustrating part, both for those who experience the problems as well as those who are sort of, I guess, like in the context of LGBT issues, right? On my side of like, I'm not directly impacted by these issues, but I care about them. You can start to feel like you aren't moving with enough urgency, and that you're just sort of letting all this stuff slide and then slipping into this sense of complacency. And that can happen. But it's also important to be able to take a step back, take a step forward, take a step left and right, be able to look at the problem from a whole bunch of different angles so that you don't sort of silo in and lose yourself in work that's really important.